Hi and welcome to Dave's Beatles channel. Today's video I'm going to be showing a great bunch of Beatles associated autographs, so please come and join me. So hello again and welcome to Dave's Beatles channel. I really hope I find all of you fab people doing really well out there, and thank you so much for joining me again today on the channel. So today's video I'm going to be showing a collection of great autographs of people associated with the Beatles. See what I done there? Well, I'm sure you don't actually need me to tell you how many people were associated with the Beatles over the years. You know, from way back to the Quarrymen days, then on to the Casbah, before of course going to Hamburg, and then finally coming back to Liverpool to be discovered by Brian Epstein in the cavern, and then of course becoming the worldwide phenomenon that actually everybody wanted to be associated with back there in the 1960s, one way or another. So my autograph collection actually contains some lovers and friends, and some are dead and some are living, but most of them actually have been personally obtained by myself since 1985. And the first two Beatles related people I ever met actually were probably two of the most important from their pre-fame period, being their first manager Alan Williams and of course the fabulous Bob Wooler, who was the Cavern DJ. Obviously I've got all of the Beatles autographs, with Paul McCartney's being obtained personally at a book signing in London at Piccadilly, and there's also a video of that on the channel if you want to check that one out, as indeed there is of me showing my Genesis book, Songs by George Harrison, which is just an absolutely beautiful and very impressive book. Now, I've also got actually an autograph of John Lennon, which was signed while he was in Germany filming the film How I Won the War. It actually came from tracks in Lancashire, which has got the provenance with that. And also I've got a Genesis book, Ringo Starr, Postcards from the Boys, which of course I'm going to be showing both of these items in the not too distant future. So anyway, we're going to be getting to those autographs pretty soon, but before then of course, it's time for I Call Your Name. So yes, it's on to those fabulous old shout-outs, and it's a great big Beatle Dave hello to Sabina He, Kaz, Tyrone Rogers, Thomas Roth, Jesse Russell, Peter Jocelyn, Jay Preza, Peter Zurib, how you doing Peter, Seri J, Frognut, Retro Nostalgia Fan, Mr Sifter, Tyrone Epps, Deborah Corsia, and Michael B. So that's an absolutely massive hi to all of you Beatles people from yours truly, Beatle Dave. So it's on to the main event then, and it's a time to have a look at a great selection of autographs associated with the Beatles. So please, come and join me. So I've got a really great bunch of autographs to show everybody today, which I really think you're going to like. And we're going to start off actually with my autograph book, which I used to take all the conventions with me. If I come across anyone that I thought was worth having an autograph, let's just see if I can turn the first page. And we've got, of course, Alan Williams. Now, obviously, Alan Williams, he was the Beatles' first manager. He also owned the Jacaranda Club in Liverpool. And, you know, he personally drove them all the way to Hamburg in 1960 for their engagements there. And, of course, unfortunately, he died in 2016. But he's a really nice guy, a really, you know, gentle soul. And, you know, he's really an important part of the Beatles' early history. So moving on then from Alan Williams, on the second page, we've got today for Bob Wooler. And there's also another Alan Williams autograph, which I'll mention in a minute as to why there's another one. So obviously Bob Wooler then, he was the Cavern DJ from 1961 to 1967. And actually at one point Alan Williams suggested, you know, that he could become the Beatles manager, but clearly he didn't want to. And actually Bob Wooler was the first also to mention the name order of John, Paul, George and Ringo. He actually died in 2002, but he was a really lovely guy. I met him in the same year as obviously as Alan Williams in 1985. And also, this second autograph then was actually, given to me by Alan in the year he died at the convention in that August. That's really sad. But he was quite frail, as I remember. But yeah, he was a really lovely guy as well. So on to the next one then. And it says, to David, have a good time, from Horst Fascher, who was an ex-boxer who befriended the Beatles in Hamburg, and he was a barman and a doorman at the Indra and the Kaiserkeller. And actually on the Beatles live album, the German album that they recorded in 1962, he actually sings Hallelujah, I Love Her So on that particular album. An interesting fact. But he was a really big guy, he's a gentle giant, and a pleasure to meet him. That was back in 85 as well. So also then in 1985, I met May Pang, and that says Love, May Pang. And obviously May, she worked as John and Yoko's personal assistant until John and Yoko separated in 1973, when subsequently she had a relationship with John for about 18 months or so. But yeah, that was a nice autograph to get. I don't think she comes to England too many times. So on from May then, we've got to Dave, regards from Sam Leach, who was famous for his concert promotions around Liverpool in such venues as the Tower Ballroom. And actually famously promoted the Aldershot gig where only a handful of people turned up. And there weren't that many, I think it was about 10 or something like that. Really, really just a small amount of people. Sadly though, he died in 2016. So this next autograph then doesn't need much introduction really. He's a great Beatles aficionado, and of course he's the author of many great Beatles books, including my favourite, The Complete Beatles Recording Sessions. And of course it's Mark Lewisohn. It says, to Dave there, best wishes, Mark Lewisohn. Really nice guy. And then we're moving on to a couple of Wings members. So we've got Steve Holley, who's obviously the drummer in the final Wings lineup from around 1979 to early 1981. Another great guy. They were both there together, Steve Holley. And of course we've got Laurence Juber. If I can just turn the next page, hopefully. And that's Laurence Juber. And obviously he was the guitarist as well in the final Wings lineup from 1979 to the early part of 1981. So moving on then from Laurence Juber, we got to David, signed Jürgen Vollmer. And obviously Jürgen was a friend and photographer from the Hamburg days, with one of his most famous photos being on John's rock and roll album. A really great photo, and of course you got the other Beatles in it as blurred images, but it's great to meet him as well. So moving on from Jürgen then, we got Patti Boyd. And obviously George met Patti on the set of A Hard Day's Night nearly 60 years ago now, and he married her in 1966, and clearly she was the inspiration for one of his best known songs, Being Something. So moving on then from Patti, we've got her younger sister being Jenny Boyd. And, she was actually a model before she started working at the Apple Boutique in 1967 in Baker Street. But, she's had quite a good career. I believe she did quite a lot of modelling and photography as well. But she was a nice lady as well. So after Jenny then, we got a bit of a mystery, because I cannot for the life of me work out who actually signed this autograph. I've been absolutely racking my brains and I just can't work it out. It's from 2022 at the Liverpool Beatles convention, but I just don't have a clue as to who it is. So if anyone out there knows, please let me know and put me out of my misery. So the very final autograph then in my autograph book is one from the real early days there, and of course you've got Colin Hanton, and he was the drummer for the Quarrymen. He played on the first recordings of In Spite of All the Danger, and That'll Be the Day. And actually he left the Quarrymen in 1959 after an argument. And Colin is still around in Liverpool somewhere. He's still up there. Sometimes he comes to the convention, but once again, he's a really nice guy. So I've got some great signed books to show now, and we're going to start off with this one by Cynthia Lennon, which is just called John. It actually came out in 2009, and it's a limited edition of 1,000. It's in really great shape, and there's the spine, but it's actually got a slip case, which I'm going to pull out. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all the pictures and things. There's a lot to go through, but we're just going to get to the meat and potato, if you like. And of course there we got limited edition of 903 out of 1,000, signed by Cynthia Lennon. A lovely lady. Obviously she was married to John in 1962, and she was pregnant with Julian at the time, who was born the following April. But sadly, John and Cynthia split up in 1968 after she found John and Yoko together in Kenwood. And sadly, Cynthia herself died in April 2015. But it's a lovely book, and it's certainly worth seeking out if you can find one. So moving on then to Patti Boyd's book, which is wonderful today, which was released in 2007, and it's the autobiography. Obviously, once again, this is in absolutely great condition. It's obviously signed by Patti, first edition. Patti Boyd, wonderful today. And you've got a facsimile autograph there, and actually not a million miles away, signed properly just underneath. I'm not going to go through, once again, I'm not going to go through all the pictures and everything, but certainly worth seeking out. It's a great read, very informative as to the relationship between herself and George, and of course herself and Eric. So we're on to then Beatle, the Pete Best story by Pete Best and Patrick Doncaster. It's a really great book, this one, and it's certainly well worth a read. I find it really quite compelling, actually, the early part of the Beatles' career. Really sad as well, the way Pete obviously was got rid of back in the early 60s. But, that was the part of the story. That's just the way the story is. Beautiful signature there in the top left in silver. A really nice guy. Great guy, really quiet spoken. But, I'm glad he's now a lot happier than he used to be. Obviously, there's a little sad bit, in this book about his life. But yeah, no, really glad that he's a lot happier these days. But I got this signed quite some years ago now, but certainly worth a read. And I think, you'll read it more than once. So on to At the Apple's Core then, which is by Dennis O'Dell with Bob Neveson. And it's actually signed by, obviously, Dennis O'Dell. I must confess, I haven't read this book, but I really do want to now. I've managed to find it again. But it's obviously in mint shape, as you can see, because I haven't read it. But somewhere just on the inside, we got Dennis O'Dell's autograph. And obviously, technically, he was a film producer, and he did work on A Hard Day's Night. And he eventually became the director of Apple, which is why we've got At the Apple's Core book. So I'm hoping this is going to be a really good read. So we're moving on then, and we've got the only authorised biography of the Beatles by Hunter Davies, and this was first released in 1968, but since then there's been several revised editions, and this particular one is from 2001, when I got it signed by Hunter Davies, who was at the Beatles convention. And there we are, to Dave from Hunter Davies. And, once again, I absolutely love this book. I certainly love the section where he's actually there and he's actually listening and actually taking note of the Beatles while they're actually writing, some of the songs from Sergeant Pepper, which is absolutely unbelievable, the fact he's there and he's actually noting everything the two of them are doing as they, write their songs. But, you can just imagine just sitting there in Cavendish Avenue and just listening to them bash out something like With a Little Help from My Friends. Just incredible. But, I really love this book, and it's certainly a book that should be in everybody's collection, because technically he spent a lot of time with the Beatles. He was there a lot in that mid-60s period. But this is a really great book. As I say, this is one of the revised editions. I think there might be one newer than this, but it's certainly worth having, this book. So we're moving on then to my final book I'm going to show today, although I've got some more items to show. This is Birth of an Icon. It's Revolver at 50, and of course it's signed by Klaus. And don't forget, it was Klaus that actually first heard the Beatles playing in Hamburg, and he was drawn to that club, and he went and investigated, and of course it was the Beatles inside. And there's Klaus there with a fantastic autograph, really great. Of course, this book's still available on Klaus's website. It's around about 50-55 euros, but it's really invaluable. It's absolutely fantastic stuff. Just going through all the Revolver bits and pieces, and you know, there's Manfred Mann. He was obviously the bass player for Manfred Mann. But there's some great photos, drawings, illustrations. Certainly worth every penny. And to actually be signed as well, even better. Great stuff. So I've got a great autograph then of Jane Asher to show now, and I actually didn't get this one personally. I actually got it from a reputable dealer online, and obviously Jane hooked up with Paul in April 1963, where Paul lived at the Ashers Wimpole house from about December 63 to 1966, before obviously moving into Cavendish Avenue, where they got engaged in 1967, but sadly broke off the following year. So it's got a nice photo of Paul and Jane there from around about 68, I think, with Jane's signature underneath. Looks good. So now I've got a great autograph photo then of Tony Sheridan, and he's the guitarist and singer who was affectionately known by the Beatles as the teacher, because they learned so much from him, obviously with showmanship and obviously writing songs, etc. And you know, he obviously collaborated with the Beatles, or back then as they were called, the Beat Brothers, on those early recordings such as My Bonnie and the Saints, etc. Great stuff. A really nice guy, and he was at the convention many years ago, which I got this from him, and it's obviously got some info on the back as well. Tony Sheridan and his website. Great stuff. So moving on then, I've got an Imagine print which is signed by Alan White. And as you can see there, the autograph of Alan White, that was actually done on the date of the 24th of August 2019 at the Penny Lane Development, Liverpool. And obviously the print itself signed there in the corner by Alan White. And obviously Alan played at the Toronto Festival with John, and obviously on the Imagine album, as well as George's All Things Must Pass. And sadly though, he died a couple of years ago in 2022. Well, we're going to end today then with this absolutely fantastic print, which is by Jeff Cummings and obviously signed by Jeff, who worked for Hypnosis, and he actually designed quite a few McCartney associated covers, including Thrillington, Temporary Secretary, and of course this Wings Over America in a gatefold. Absolutely wonderful. I've met him a couple of times. He's been at the last two conventions in 2022 and 23. And of course at the bottom there, you got To Dave, and I got a heart, Jeff Cummings. A wonderful, wonderful print to end with. Really looks great, that one. So that's it for today, guys, and I really hope you've enjoyed seeing the majority of my associated Beatles signed items. And don't forget, as always, any comments or communication I get from any of you fantastic Beatles people about today's video that I've made, I will of course always come back to you just as soon as I can. So on the next video then, and you may remember, you know, I showed some fabulous bootleg vinyl LPs last year. So this time actually I thought it would be really great and only right to show you some Beatles bootleg CDs, which you're going to absolutely love. So please make sure that you're here on the next video, same Beatles time, same Beatles channel. So anyway, as always, if you enjoy what I'm doing, why not give us a like, subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future videos. This is Beatle Dave signing off.